Hey, welcome to Quick Take. I'm your just one host, an equal host.
An equal host. We are co-hosts. You are my muse. There we go.
Although I have control today because
All the
we
control.
just to be completely transparent, we normally talk about just briefly about what we're talking about. And very often we don't start talking about it because we know that's the episode.
Right. We
So,
spend 10 minutes pre-record pre before the recording doing the episode and then have to stop ourselves because we get excited. So
yeah,
today is not the case.
today, I didn't even tell James what we're talking about today, and it's very close to my heart because it's actually happening to me. So, I was in this situation where I evidently made somebody not very happy with me.
That
I
is
was giving
super weird.
them they
That how
asked
could
for
that ever
feedback.
happen?
I know. They asked for feedback, and I gave pretty direct feedback, like, it was about it didn't feel personal to me, but evidently, it was really personal to the other person, and they didn't come back to me and talk to me about it, but they told their boss. And then
Ooh.
their boss like texted me and said, "Hey, can we have a conversation?" Da, 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 da. And the boss was on the call too, so they were a part of it. And then I had this conversation. She basically said, "This is the feedback that you attacked. Like you're not attacked. Let me reuse my words. You were that this person felt like I was saying that they're not doing a very good job." And that all of the things that I was critiquing, and I was like, "But that was the point of the meeting, we were trying to," like, so my from my perspective, it was so interesting that I just was, like, kind of, like, not paying attention to the personalities. I was just being really authentic, and I went into, like, "What do we need to do to maximize improvement?"
Sure.
And that felt very personal to this person. But the biggest thing for me, and I'm sorry, this is therapy for me because it's been reeling in my head.
Okay, I'm
The
good.
one thing that it was really interesting to me in going through this, because I talk a lot about feedback with leaders, was the fact that the feedback went through kind of the telephone thing, amplified and really diluted and also magnified the feedback in a way that it shouldn't have been. Like, if that person would have
Totally
talked to
understand your
me
point.
directly,
Yes, I
it would have been
understand.
just squashed, but because it had this life, and this person that was in the middle was like, "Why is this happening? Why do they feel this way?" And so they started projecting, like, these
Sure,
other, like,
sure.
"It must have happened with this," and so they were bringing in because they wanted to figure it out, and so my bottom line is feedback is not something to take lightly. And if you're a leader and somebody gives you feedback about somebody else, don't be the person, like, really think about, should you be the person that then relays the feedback?
Very interesting. Yeah, I can see how that was manifested in a really negative fashion. I can't help but think of the game of telephone
Yeah,
that
exactly.
when you share information to the next person, their filter, their biases, their history, whatever, is going to modify what you say and take that on to the next person. And whether it's you just whispering some silly phrase at a party or feedback, there's 0% chance it's going to land on the next set of ears in the manner that you intended it
Exactly.
to.
And it's so true that what you learned in kindergarten is so applicable.
Always
And that's
applicable.
exactly what I thought. I thought,
Right.
wow, isn't that really interesting that that is the same experience as in junior high, and it has a life of its own because we all have a different lens of how we see the world.
Mhm.
So, even if you try as hard as you can to be as factual as possible, you still only see it from your place, and
Yep. Yep.
that person is acting fine to me. So that adds this, like, weirdness to it. There's no, like, reconciliation.
Yeah, I understand your frustration and the confusion really and the I think the confusion comes from landing in a place that is not 1 or 2 or 3 degrees away from where you thought you'd be, but you're on another planet at another time, and that's really wild. I wonder, you know, is there a way to provide feedback? Now, remind me in this case, the feedback you were giving, so you gave feedback to person A, and then you ended up a in an office with person A and person A's boss discussing the feedback person A had been given. That's
No,
correct?
person A talked to person B, and then person B called me. So
Right,
person
right.
B was very sympathetic to me and was like,
I
"Oh, I
understand,
think, like,
sure.
don't,"
But person A wasn't in the
Yes.
room when
No.
you got called on the carpet, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look, I think if it my perspective on that is clearly, look, if you went into the situation with best of intentions, with A game on, and with positive intent, which I don't know that you've ever not done that. It would be very difficult for you to do that any way, shape, or form. But if you did those three things, then you did the right thing. And what you really were experiencing was a an non-functioning or healthy relationship between person A and person,
Yeah.
and really person A's inability to, grow, listen, hear, or be open to change.
Yeah.
And I suspect person A was looking for person B to tell them to ignore you, that, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's just a consultant. Ignore that. You're the best.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
person B was as seasoned as you perhaps imply and was sympathetic to you, they know that they could have predicted that was probably going to happen,
Yeah.
because there was nothing you could have said to person A that would allow them to truly hear what you were suggesting.
Totally. Okay, so I'm gonna take a total right turn. So this is exactly what an executive would do when you're triggered by feedback and you're like, so I go to a trusted friend that has your C. You have nothing to do with it.
Yep,
You have my best interest in mind, and you've just made me feel better.
yep.
But let's go back. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to give you a different perspective because I've been thinking about this, because I've been thinking about talking about this. And this is really hard for me. I don't really respect person A. And I think that I probably came across differently than I felt I did.
Very possible. That's very
And so
possible.
I've been really thinking about the fact that, yes, my intentions weren't, to be honest, they weren't honestly to do that,
Right?
but I was biased. I was charged up because I probably doubled down when I saw her push against.
Yep, yep.
And so I've been thinking about, like, one thing about feedback is we always think about how we give it, but executives, leaders need to think about how they take it.
Sure.
And there is always a lesson to be learned. So while I do think I've been just riled up about it, I also really believe that I need to, like, think about how do I show up and how
Oh,
do
for
I
sure.
limit my unobjective self?
Well, if I could disagree with you, your unobjective self isn't very interesting.
Fair. Okay. That
And
I
so
agree.
and so you
True for
are who
all of
you
us.
are, and you look, the things that make you good are things that are unique to you. Yes, we can be better, and you could have perhaps given that feedback in a better way, and you should learn that, right? And you should know, like, there has been more than one occasion. In fact, I could argue today experienced this, where I was in a position to give somebody feedback about something that I'm very sick and tired of giving somebody feedback on,
Yeah.
but I knew I was not in the place to do it. And I
Mhm.
knew that now is not the time, and I
Yeah.
was not going to give it in a way that was going to be heard. And perhaps my spidey senses were in a situation, or knew that that person was not in a situation to hear it. So if there is a takeaway, there is the reminder that even when somebody does say, I want your feedback, and they sort of
Yeah.
imply, or maybe, or even are genuinely in a place to get it, there's two sides to that coin. They may be ready to hear it, but are you really ready to give it?
Yeah.
And maybe not, maybe it's not about you being ready, or excuse me, you're ready to give it, but it may not be simply that you have the information or have a good way to describe it or the words. You may just not be in a good place to do it,
Yeah.
right? It could be,
Totally.
for me, 4 cups of coffee in and 10 meetings down, and I can barely, blink without hearing my eyelids crunch. And that's not a great time for me to be very present and very aware. So
And I
that's
think
maybe a
that's a
thought.
important point around, as executive leaders, it's easier to give feedback when you're emotionally charged or you're mad at them or there's like you're at a heightened state because giving difficult feedback means you have to go through some emotion. So if you're already there, sometimes it's easier. And I think
Mm.
that's a really risky position to
Oh,
take.
yeah, okay, I'm gonna take it, I disagree with you, but I think it's a James thing and not a general thing. One of my superpowers, and I call it that only because it's funny, but it's really my trauma, is that when people get more energetic and more panicked and more aggressive, more emotional, I go down. Rarely do I match people's energy. I always go the other direction. And I know that I am zero good at giving any sort of constructive or coherent feedback when I'm at a high level.
That's my point, though. You missed my
That's
point.
exactly right.
My point is like when you're doing that, that is not always the best time to do it because you're not clear.
I misunderstood and thought you were saying that some people are good at that. And I think that there are people who are good at that, who are able to in real
Yes.
time. I can imagine on the battlefield of whether it's battlefield of life, battlefield of the Ukraine, whatever, that there are people who are able to give amazing feedback and constructive direction under duress. I just know that I am not, I can observe it and I can file that away and go, oh, this is one of those things that is a really good opportunity, but to bring up, but I'm not able to articulate it just as well as I can when I'm in a more stable
Yeah.
situation.
I think most people are that way, and my point is, it's easier because you wanna get it off your chest in that time when
Very
you're
true.
emotionally
Oh,
charged,
that is
so
true.
that
That can be
you're
true.
not able to be objective to say how they need to hear it or what their needs are,
Yeah.
because it's just easier that moment just to because you wanna get it
Just
off your
blurt it out.
chest.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
Just say
that's
your
something that
yeah.
is not fair as a leader to go and move forward, especially if it's like you've been delaying giving this feedback and they do it again. And you're so like, oh, they've done it again. I'm just going to go for it right now. That is not serving them. That's
Right.
just serving
Right.
you.
Yep. 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 That's 100% a great point where it may satisfy your need you're going to win the battle, but you're going to lose the war. That ultimately that situation may not be the time for that person to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really great point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this feedback whole thing was just something that made me realize and remember that it's all about it's you have to really think about what you need to hear. And sometimes you need the space and hear it with somebody else that could be helpful to you, but sometimes you need to take a step back when you are unemotional and think about the words that people have said and evaluate because I feel really bad about the situation. I
Sure.
don't really not like I just that person is able to get my triggers. They just know my buttons.
Yep. Yep.
And so I just need to be aware of that. And as executive leaders, I think it's our responsibility to do that.
The way I think about it is the feedback ceremony is a ceremony between two people. And
Mhm.
both of those people have to be in a position to both give and receive that
Yep.
feedback. And if they are either side of that coin, either side of that ceremony is not in the right place, then that ceremony will not function.
Yep.
It's
I
that
totally
simple.
agree. Totally agree. I and one of my favorite books on the topic, and this is where we'll end, is Thanks for the Feedback. I
Great
don't
book.
get any benefit from saying that, but it is like an important read for all leaders.
It's a great point. Great book. Great topic. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.